I never imagined that the day I lost everything would begin like any other sunny morning. The birds singing and the air carrying the faint scent of jasmine from my mother's garden. But life has a way of twisting the ordinary into chaos. My name is Isabella Hart, and that morning I walked into my office, a space I had built from scratch, a business that had been my lifeline, only to find a man I trusted more than my own reflection grinning at me like he owned my world. Question: have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought would never hurt you? If not, buckle up, because this story is about how betrayal can feel like fire running through your veins and how revenge can sometimes be the only medicine. It started with a phone call I ignored at first, a number I didn't recognize, but intuition whispered that I should pick up. "Isabella, you need to see this," the voice on the line said, panic and something darker, malice, hidden behind the words. I arrived at the office to see my worst nightmare displayed in neon lights across my computer screen. Contracts I'd signed, partnerships I had nurtured, and funds I'd saved, all manipulated by my supposed best friend and business partner, Adrian Blackwell. He had forged my signature, siphoned money, and convinced the board to believe he was the visionary behind my company. My blood ran cold, my chest tightened, and the world I had built with sweat, sleepless nights, and tears seemed to crumble beneath my feet. Anger bubbled within me, sharp and dangerous, but it was the humiliation that stung the most. Adrian didn't just betray me financially. He destroyed my reputation, painting me as careless, incompetent, and greedy. Every message, every email, every casual meeting with our clients had been twisted into evidence of my failings. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my shaking hands. But the tremor wasn't fear, it was the first spark of vengeance igniting inside me. I knew I couldn't let him get away with it. I remember sitting in my office chair, staring at the screen, heart pounding, a storm raging in my mind. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. "Bella, are you okay?" she asked. My voice, usually steady and composed, broke. "Mom, he's taken everything." Tears threatened to spill, but I blinked them away, forcing myself to breathe. It was in that moment I realized that anger alone wouldn't suffice. I needed a plan, a strategy, a way to turn the tables so completely that Adrian would regret ever crossing me. And so, the seed of revenge was planted. I wanted it to be intelligent, precise, and painful, not mindless retaliation. Adrian had underestimated me, and that was his first mistake. As I sketched out ideas on a scrap of paper, my cat, Luna, jumped onto my desk, nudging my hand as if to remind me to stay calm, to focus. It was absurd, really, talking to a cat about scheming against a human, but in that moment, I found a strange sense of clarity. I would dismantle his empire piece by piece, exposing every lie, every deceit, every hidden betrayal he had buried beneath a facade of charm and confidence. I won't lie, revenge is intoxicating. There's a thrill in knowing that your target believes they are untouchable, that their smirk will fade when the truth claws its way to the surface. But even as I nurtured this dark excitement, I reminded myself to be patient. I couldn't rush. I had to gather evidence, allies, and ammunition. Every phone call, every casual meeting, every small observation could be a piece of the puzzle that would ultimately destroy Adrian's carefully constructed world. Before the storm of my plan could begin, I needed to alert my supporters, the people who had believed in me from start. "If you're watching this," I whispered into my camera, my fingers trembling as I recorded a short clip for my loyal social media followers. "Like and subscribe, because I'm about to share a story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate justice. This isn't just my story. It's a warning to anyone who thinks they can manipulate others and escape consequences." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, fierce and unrelenting. My followers wouldn't know the full story yet, but soon they would witness every twist, every revelation, every moment Adrian thought he had won. As the day faded into evening, I left the office with a quiet determination. The city lights flickered like stars, indifferent to the turmoil below, but I felt a strange peace in knowing that I had chosen a path, one that would demand courage, cunning, and patience. Adrian might have thought he had buried me, but he had only unearthed a force he could never contain. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but one thing was certain. The game had begun, and I was no longer the victim. I was the storm. The night air was crisp as I drove home, the city lights reflecting off the windshield like shards of broken glass. Each red traffic light felt like a heartbeat, pulsing with tension and anticipation. I couldn't stop thinking about Adrian and the audacity of his betrayal. How could someone I trusted, someone I laughed with over coffee, someone I confided in my deepest fears, become the architect of my ruin? The anger had dulled slightly, replaced by a cold, calculated determination. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my peace. I arrived at my apartment, a modest space I had decorated with memories of simpler times, and the silence was almost suffocating. Luna jumped from the windowsill to greet me, rubbing against my leg as if sensing the turmoil within me. I knelt and stroked her fur, whispering, "We're going to fix this, Luna. We're going to make him pay, but carefully." Her soft purring was strangely comforting, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone in this fight. The first step was gathering evidence. Adrian was meticulous, precise even, but no one is flawless. Everyone leaves traces if you know where to look. I spent hours combing through financial records, emails, and messages. Each discovery fueled a mixture of fury and vindication. There were contracts with forged signatures, payments routed through dummy accounts, and whispers of deals Adrian had made behind my back. It was a labyrinth of deceit, but I felt like a detective uncovering the crime of a lifetime. Emotions overwhelmed me at unexpected moments. I would glance at a photograph of my company's launch day, my proudest moment, and feel tears sting my eyes. The memory of walking into the office for the first time, seeing our name in gold letters on the front door, filled me with a bittersweet ache. That dream had been stolen, yet every tear I shed was also a reminder of what I had to fight for. I clenched my fists, promising myself silently that I would not let this man win. But it wasn't only the financial betrayal that stung. It was the way Adrian had tried to erase me, painting me as weak and incompetent to anyone who would listen. I imagined the whispered conversations behind closed doors, the subtle smirks at meetings where I was no longer welcomed, and my chest tightened with rage. He had underestimated me, thought I would crumble and disappear, but he had no idea what I was capable of. That night, sleep evaded me. I paced my apartment, mind racing with strategies, contingencies, and possible outcomes. I even began to write letters. Not to send, not yet, but to articulate my plan and envision the moment when Adrian's facade would finally crack. Each sentence was a balm to my wounded pride, each paragraph a declaration of war. By dawn, I had a rough blueprint. Expose him publicly, reclaim my assets legally, and ensure that every person who had doubted me would witness his downfall. Despite the chaos swirling inside, there were moments of vulnerability. I caught myself wondering if the person I was becoming, cold, calculating, focused solely on revenge, was someone I could live with. Was justice worth sacrificing pieces of my own soul? But then I reminded myself that this wasn't mere vengeance. It was rectification. Adrian had taken what was mine, and the world needed to see that deceit has consequences. The next morning, I met with a trusted lawyer, someone I had confided in during the early days of my business. I explained everything, and as I spoke, I realized the weight I had been carrying alone. "You're smart, Isabella," she said firmly. "And angry. That's good. Anger can be a weapon if you use it wisely. But patience is your greatest ally." Her words resonated deeply. I wasn't going to act recklessly. I needed precision. Every move had to be strategic, every step calculated, or Adrian would slip through my fingers again. Over the following days, I started planting seeds. Small actions, seemingly innocuous, designed to test Adrian, provoke him, and reveal his weaknesses. I reconnected with a few board members discreetly, whispering hints of irregularities I had uncovered. I sent carefully crafted emails to clients, not revealing the full truth, but suggesting a shift in leadership and vision. I observed Adrian closely, noting his mannerisms, the little tics when he was lying, the cracks in his carefully maintained smile. Every detail mattered. Amid the plotting and strategizing, moments of humanity broke through. I would sit by the window, watching the world continue in oblivion, people laughing, walking dogs, living lives untouched by deceit. A pang of longing hit me. I wanted normalcy, I wanted peace, but I couldn't have it until justice was served. It was a delicate balance, walking the line between obsession and resolve, between anger and clarity. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the glass, I found myself smiling. For the first time since the betrayal. Not a carefree smile, but a quiet, confident one. I realized something vital. Adrian had underestimated not just my intellect, but my resilience. He had assumed I would be broken, but in reality, the fire he had ignited would forge me into something stronger, sharper, unstoppable. And yet, the most important question remained. How far was I willing to go to reclaim what was mine? How much of myself would I sacrifice in this pursuit of justice and revenge? The answer was elusive, shifting like smoke, but one thing was certain. I would not rest until every lie was exposed, until every person who had been manipulated saw the truth. As the storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the cityscape, I made my silent vow. Adrian's world would crumble, piece by piece, and I would be the architect of his undoing. But more than that, I would reclaim my own power, my own sense of self, and my own life. The calm before the storm had ended. Now, the reckoning was about to begin. The morning sun had barely pierced the clouds when I arrived at Adrian's office building, a towering glass monolith that had always symbolized his power. Today, however, it felt fragile, as if the weight of his deceit had hollowed it from within. I took a deep breath, smoothing my blouse and forcing a calm expression. This was the first real move in my strategy, the subtle strike that would remind him I was not a victim but a force to be reckoned with. I had prepared meticulously. Every email, every document, every conversation was calculated. I knew Adrian thrived on arrogance, on believing he was untouchable. Today, that illusion would crack. Walking into the building, I noticed the receptionist giving me a curious glance. Normally, she would barely acknowledge me, but today there was recognition in her eyes, a hint of curiosity, perhaps, or the faintest suspicion. I smiled politely, masking the thrill pulsing inside me. My first encounter with Adrian was brief but electric. He was in the middle of a meeting with investors, gesturing confidently, his laughter filling the room. When he saw me, the smile faltered slightly, almost imperceptibly. I relished it. It was the first crack in his armor. "Isabella," he said, his voice controlled but tight. "What brings you here?" I offered a polite nod, my tone even. Just thought I'd drop by to review some documents. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings, would we? He laughed, a hollow, rehearsed sound, and waved me in. But I wasn't there for pleasantries. I had already planted subtle seeds among his team, hinting at discrepancies and irregularities I had discovered. The whispers had begun circulating quietly, and now it was time for the first public tremor. I slid into the conference room, laptop in hand, and positioned myself at the edge of the table. My presence alone caused a ripple. Investors exchanged glances, the room thick with unspoken tension. "Before we start," I began, my voice steady, "I wanted to address a few points regarding recent financial reports and partnerships." I opened my laptop, projecting documents onto the screen. Emails with forged signatures, unusual fund transfers, and contradictory statements filled the display. The room went silent. Adrian's face tightened, his confidence visibly shaking for the first time. He leaned forward, attempting to regain control, but every eye in the room was on the evidence I presented. The effect was immediate. Investors murmured, some pulling out their phones to double-check figures. Adrian tried to interject, his voice rising in panic. "Isabella, these are misinterpretations," he protested. But the documents spoke for themselves. The meticulous records I had gathered left no room for lies. Every forged signature, Every hidden transaction was laid bare, and the room was full of people realizing the man they had trusted was not who they thought he was. Even as I watched the scene unfold, my heart pounded. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. And yet, there was an unexpected pang of sorrow. Adrian had been more than a business partner. He had been my friend, my confidant. The betrayal cut deep, and watching the crumbling of everything he had manipulated was both satisfying and painful. The duality of emotions was dizzying, but I refused to let it cloud my focus. This was the moment I had prepared for. After what felt like an eternity, Adrian stormed out of the room, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. The investors were left whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others quietly congratulating me. I allowed myself a small, victorious smile, but quickly masked it with professional composure. This was only the first strike. The storm had begun, but it was far from over. Later that evening, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying every moment. My phone buzzed incessantly. Emails from journalists, calls from concerned clients, even a few messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all now aware that Adrian's empire was unraveling. The power shift was intoxicating, but it also brought an unexpected loneliness. Victory felt hollow without someone to share it with. I realized that revenge, as sweet as it could be, carried its own cost. But I couldn't afford sentimentality. The next phase of my plan required precision. I began reaching out to former employees who had suffered under Adrian's manipulation, encouraging them to speak out, to corroborate my findings. Each story, each account, added layers to the narrative of his deceit. The more truth came to light, the smaller and weaker he appeared, and the more determined I became. Amidst this, a question kept gnawing at me. Would Adrian ever truly understand the pain he caused, or was he too consumed by ego to feel remorse? I didn't have an answer, and perhaps I never would. But it no longer mattered. My focus was on action, not reflection. I had learned that waiting for acknowledgement or apology was futile. Justice was my responsibility, and I would take it. One night, as I reviewed the growing mountain of evidence, my resolve solidified. I realized that revenge was not merely a single act, but a series of carefully orchestrated moves. Each strike had to be timed, each revelation strategically deployed. Adrian had underestimated me completely, and that mistake would be his undoing. I allowed myself a small moment of satisfaction, imagining his expression as his world continued to crumble around him. But life, as always, is unpredictable. Just when I thought I had control, an unexpected email arrived, an anonymous tip suggesting that Adrian had been hiding something far more sinister, a secret that could destroy not only my company, but my personal reputation as well. My heart skipped a beat. The stakes had just escalated. The game I thought I was mastering now carried the weight of unknown dangers. But rather than fear, I felt a surge of adrenaline. Every challenge, every obstacle, was fuel for the fire within me. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the rain streaking the window. This wasn't just a battle for business or money. It was a battle for my life, my identity, and my future. Adrian may have believed he had destroyed me, but he had only awakened a strength he could never comprehend. The storm was no longer just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself entirely. Tomorrow, I decided I would confront the next piece of the puzzle. Every lie, every betrayal, every hidden agenda would be uncovered, piece by piece. And when the final revelation came, Adrian would understand, fully and utterly, that the person he tried to destroy had become unstoppable. The first strike had been just a taste of the reckoning to come. The day had arrived, the day I had been building toward in careful silence, a day when all the hidden truths, all the manipulations, and all the deceit would finally be exposed. The city hummed around me, oblivious to the storm that was about to break in one glass-walled office, and yet I felt a quiet calm inside. Every moment of pain, every sleepless night, every tear shed in secret had led to this. I had transformed my anger into strategy, my sorrow into strength, and now I was ready to reclaim everything that had been stolen. Adrian didn't know I was coming. He had grown complacent, confident that the whispers and small tremors I had sent through the company were harmless, that I was still a powerless shadow of the person he had betrayed. That arrogance had been his greatest mistake. As I stepped in a lobby, my heels clicking against the marble floor, I felt every bit of fear, rage, and anticipation coursing through me. This was no longer just about business. It was about justice, dignity, and the affirmation that no one could manipulate me without consequence. I was greeted by a few familiar faces, clients who had begun noticing irregularities, employees who had suffered silently under Adrian's tyranny. Their eyes, filled with curiosity, respect, and a hint of excitement, fueled me. I smiled politely, letting my presence radiate authority and calm, even as my heart pounded with anticipation. Adrian appeared from around the corner, his expression caught between disbelief and irritation. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" he demanded, voice tight and unconvincing. Showing the truth, I replied simply, letting the weight of the words hang in the air. I set my laptop on the conference table and began projecting a series of documents, emails, and financial reports. Each file revealed layer after layer of Adrian's manipulation, forged contracts, embezzled funds, misleading partnerships, and lies carefully designed to isolate me from the company I had built. Investors leaned forward, employees whispered to each other, and Adrian's confident posture began to crumble. His face twisted with panic. "This is impossible. These are fabrications," he shouted. I met his gaze steadily, feeling the satisfaction of knowing that no amount of bluster could erase the undeniable truth. I collected every piece of evidence myself. Every word, every number, every signature has been verified. "You underestimated me, Adrian, and that was your first mistake." The room grew tense, almost suffocating. The board members, once swayed by Adrian's charm, now looked at him with suspicion. Clients who had doubted me began sending private messages, confirming transactions and validating my findings. The realization that his empire was unraveling before his very eyes caused Adrian's mask of control to shatter. He tried to interrupt, tried to twist the narrative, but his words fell flat, drowned out by the silent weight of truth. Tears welled to my eyes, not of sorrow but of relief. The betrayal that had once burned through my chest like wildfire was finally being addressed. I had been patient, meticulous, and unwavering, and now I was witnessing the consequences of his choices. The injustice that had once consumed me was now reversing, bringing a strange sense of catharsis. And yet, the human part of me, the part that had once trusted him, laughed with him, shared dreams with him, was quietly mourning the loss of what could have been. Adrian slumped into his chair, defeated, his usual arrogance replaced by despair. "If you can't do this," he whispered, the words barely audible, stripped of all authority. I stepped closer, my voice calm but resolute. "I already have, and now everyone knows. Every person you deceived, every lie you told, every corner you try to hide and has been exposed. You are no longer untouchable." In that moment, I realized the most powerful part of revenge was not the public humiliation, reclamation of self, not the legal victories. I had taken back my life, my reputation, and my power. I had transformed from victim to victor, from the woman who had been blindsided by betrayal to the one orchestrating the truth. And in that transformation, I discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a resilience that could withstand deceit, heartbreak, and manipulation. The investors slowly applauded, some quietly, some with enthusiasm, acknowledging the courage it took to confront the man who had once held so much sway over their decisions. Employees who had feared retaliation for speaking up now whispered words of gratitude and admiration. I nodded politely, but my mind was already shifting forward, imagining the future, a future where I would rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. As the dust settled, Adrian was escorted out of the building, head bowed, the weight of exposure pressing down on him. He would face legal consequences, yes, but the personal reckoning, knowing that he had lost everything to someone he had underestimated. was already complete. I watched him leave, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. Revenge, after all, is a bittersweet journey. The satisfaction of justice often comes intertwined with echoes of the past, memories of pain, and the realization that some losses cannot be undone. Later that evening, I returned home, exhausted but serene. Luna leapt onto my lap, her gentle purring grounding me in the present. I sat quietly, reflecting on the journey, the betrayal, the pain, the sleepless nights, and the carefully executed revenge. Every step had been deliberate, every emotion harnessed for strength. And now, as I looked out at the city lights flickering like tiny promises of new beginnings, I felt a profound sense of rebirth. I had learned that life could be cruel, that trust could be shattered, and that people could betray without hesitation. But I had also learned that resilience, courage, and intelligence could turn despair into victory. I had discovered the power of patience, the necessity of strategy, and the importance of reclaiming one's own voice. Most importantly, I had realized that revenge, when guided by purpose and justice, could be transformative, not only for the one who suffered, but for the one who fought back. As I turned off the lights, I whispered to myself, "This is not the end. It's only the beginning." And in that quiet moment, I knew it was true. Adrian's chapter had closed, but my story, my journey of strength, courage, and triumph, was just beginning. I had faced betrayal, embraced the storm, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. And as I drifted into sleep, I felt the promise of tomorrow, a life reclaimed, a self restored, and a heart unbroken, ready to face whatever challenges awaited.